You're listening to episode 98 of the Your Next Chapter podcast. Inspiration, clarity, confidence, and wholehearted growth strategies. Welcome to Your Next Chapter, the podcast especially for women in their 40s and beyond who know that business and personal development go hand in hand. In every episode, I bring you inspiring people, stories, ideas, and lessons from around the globe to help you and your business to flourish. I'm your host, Angela Rasmus, and I'm so delighted that you're here. Hello and welcome to the Your Next Chapter podcast. Thank you so much for lending your ears to this week's episode. I really appreciate the time that you're carving out in your day for this little bit of inspiration from another wonderful Next Chapter businesswoman that I'm talking with today. Now, today we are having this conversation with Carolyn Butler Madden, who is the founder of The Cause Effect, a quite sensational agency that's here in Sydney. Now, the thing that I really enjoyed about this episode, and I'm absolutely sure you will be inspired by as well, is this particular quote. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but how's this? I used to love what I do, and now I'm doing what I love. Just let that sink in for a moment and I'll explain the reasoning behind it. Now, Carolyn, like so many of us, sort of fell into the work that she did for a very long time. Rather than have this burning ambition to be in the world of advertising and marketing, it just sort of happened. And I can totally relate to that as well. When I fell into the world of sales and marketing myself, way back many years ago. And sometimes we do very well in the industry that we find ourselves in, and that was certainly true of Carolyn, the most amazing 30-year career, and actually having her own ad agency here in Sydney as well when she moved across from the UK. But what she found is that there was this division between who she was inside and the work that she was doing. Now, that's not to suggest that, as I said, she wasn't doing a fabulous job for her clients, but there was something that Carolyn had inherited, and that was this real connection to cause from her mum. And so in her weekends and part-time, she was doing things like volunteering with Amnesty International and seeing that as very separate to the work that she was doing in the world. That was far more commercial, inverted commas. Now, over time, this feeling of a lack of polarity was actually coming up further and further until she had this incredible moment at an event that she went to when she discovered cause marketing. And she realized that she could take her skills, her strengths, but then actually combine those with her passions, her purpose, her vision, her mission. And that's exactly what she did with reinvigorating, taking her business into its next chapter and creating the cause effect. This is one of those wonderful interviews that I hope lights a fire under you as well, so that you can recognize that it is absolutely possible to combine those strengths and skills with what's in your heart. Really, that's what a next chapter business is all about. I believe it's that harmony between contribution and fulfillment. That's the sweet spot that we all want to live in. So I hope you enjoyed this interview. I look forward to hearing your feedback. And of course, if you have a moment to either leave a review or subscribe to the podcast, both of those activities would be awesome. So I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I'll talk to you again real soon. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Your Next Chapter podcast. My name, of course, is Angela Rasmus, and today we are talking with Carolyn Butler Madden. And the reason I was so excited about talking to Carolyn when I met her at one of my salon dinners here in Sydney is this mission that she's on, this mission that is really firing up and empowering her and making her passionate about turning up to work every day, may I say. Carolyn's on a mission to put social purpose on the business agenda. Carolyn, I am really, really glad that you're here with me today, and I can't wait to hear about this next chapter that's unfolding in your business. Thank you for spending the time.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Angela.
Yay. Well, when I'm talking with guests, one of the things that I'm most interested in delving into first and foremost is the previous chapters. Now, we're all a work in progress, and we don't get to this stage in life without having a few exit stage left and detours and derailments and then so almost like reinventions. So I'd love to know at this point in time, you're the captain of the cause effect, but how did you get to this point? What were some of those previous chapters that unveiled?
Okay, I'll take you on my little journey. So I was in the advertising agency world for over 30 years. I started in London and spent 10 years there in an agency, and then here in Sydney for the last 20 years or so, and running my own agencies actually for the last, almost 20 years. And it was something I fell into. Like it wasn't a career, I didn't have this burning ambition. I fell into it purely by accident. Back in those days, you could get into somewhere through the back door, and I did. And I just fell into something that I thoroughly enjoyed, I loved, and I was good at. But I found, I guess when growing up, I grew up with a very strong social conscience. It was something my mother instilled in both me and my sister. And as much as I loved what I did, there's a disconnect, isn't there? If you have a strong social conscience, if you're a bit of a social activist, which I was, that sort of advertising and marketing and commercialism doesn't sit particularly well with that. And so I managed those two parts of my lives quite separately. And, personal life, I'd be off at rallies, protest marches, member of Amnesty International, that sort of thing. And then in my work life, I was wholly committed to my clients and the work I did. Then I discovered cause marketing. And that was about 12 years ago. And it was, cause marketing, which is aligning a brand with a cause and leveraging it to gain commercial benefit and social impact. Done it before for clients as part of what we did for them, but this was the first time we did it for a client strategically, and the results were phenomenal. And it was in that moment that I kind of went, ping, whoa, this could be something for me. And that feeling you get, Angela, when you just get that level of excitement.
Yeah, you know that you are navigating towards purpose when you get that. It comes definitely, it's an internal, almost like a wee fireworks going off.
And I didn't know it was that at that time. All I knew was, oh my God, this is something that really excites me. And that was 12 years ago. So this pivot has taken quite a long time. But in fact, there were a couple of pivots. But I then took myself off to Chicago, to the world's biggest cause marketing conference back then. And it just changed my world. What I saw, what they were doing over there back then, 7 years ago, was phenomenal, and it just lit my fire. And I came back this raving lunatic evangelist that annoyed the bejesus out of so many people, because I'd be going, but cause marketing. And at that stage, I had a small agency of 8 people, and we worked for big brands, so brands like Caltex and AGL. We did work for them, and all sorts of other people, other businesses. And we kept getting dragged. I tried to steer the agency down that path, but it's really hard when you've got a team and you've got to pay their salaries, and a client comes and says, we need a new product launch, or we need a promotion, or we need this, or we need that, and it's not aligned with where you're trying to go. It's really hard to say no, because you're constantly looking at, making sure that you can pay the salaries and keep things going. So I struggled with that pivot, really, really struggled with it. And the other point there was, it was too soon for the market here in Australia. I think we were too early. My team, the people I had on board, a bunch of amazing millennials, were 110% inspired, and really, at that point we were clear on our purpose, but it just wasn't to be.
I understand that concept, because I had an agency as well. I had a small business marketing agency when I first left corporate world. I loved your description, because we take the skills that we had and we almost like fall into an opportunity. We create that opportunity, and it's logical because I have these skills and experience, so let's use it. And I often talk about how I built my business, like that concept of you're climbing the ladder but you're not actually checking what wall it's up against. You could get to the top of the ladder and realize it's against the wrong wall. So I had that very much feeling, but I also had what you were experiencing, this almost dissonance going on, because as my business got bigger and I bought an office and I had full-time staff, my overheads became larger. The need for those responsibilities that you have can dictate the type of work that you accept.
Absolutely.
And your heart's saying, but this isn't exactly it. And your head's saying, but you have to pay the bills. And so that dissonance, that almost tore me apart. That's the reason why I closed in 2012 and pivoted and started going in a new direction as well, because that, as you described it perfectly, how you had the self at work and then the self out of work, but you can't continue that split forevermore. It's too difficult.
It is a split, isn't it?
Yes, very much. And I wanted to be congruent, like the person I was at work is the person that I am at home, is the person, like in all those areas. Obviously, you have a slightly different angle when you're in work mode, but it needs to nevertheless be congruent with what's in your heart. And that's why I needed to change and have that next chapter. It sounds like we're kindred spirits, my dear.
I think we are. And so for me, I found, and it did feel like a split personality, because there was one part of me that I got off on making money, delivering results for my client. I got off at the intersection of creativity, strategy, and results. Yeah, loved it. And it would just light me up. And yet it felt there was something not right about it, because there was this other part of me that felt like the world is unjust. There are people that need help. The ones that are doing well are doing better, and the ones that aren't are doing worse, and all sorts of things. And so definitely that disconnect resonated with me.
And so recognizing that you had the desire, you had the team that had the desire, the market wasn't quite ready. So there had to be some baby steps. And I think that's really important for people to understand, is that sometimes we can see the thing that we want to step into, but we can't leap immediately. I hear, and I've shared on the podcast, many stories of people who sort of went, screw it, I'm going to do it. And they jumped and all power to them. Absolutely. But that's not necessarily possible in every case. So how did that interim work for you, from recognizing to instigating?
Look, I feel a bit fraudulent here, because as much as I was trying to instigate, it kind of instigated me in the end.
That happens. The universe can sometimes just arrange things when it's got to happen. Tell us more.
Do you know what? I think that's exactly what happened. So I'm pretty stubborn, and I was continuing to try to push the agency in that direction towards cause marketing and social purpose. But it was a struggle. It was definitely a struggle. And then, and also I was getting sucked into the day-to-day and everything else, so I wasn't investing the time where I needed to do it if I was going to get the result I wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
And the question was always going to be, could the business afford to make that pivot at this stage? And then all these things happened. I had, so Caltex were my longest standing client, had them for, it was 19 years we'd had them.
Whoa.
And we had created their local community marketing program. And anyway, new brand team came in, big changes, and they decided to bring a clean broom in. At the time, it was very frustrating because we were delivering them the best results they'd ever had, and we'd won all this business off their big brand agency. But look, these things happen. And despite the fact that they were our biggest client and they were huge, and I knew it would have a big impact on the business, I kind of took that as, well, that's fine. Maybe this gives me time to try and steer the agency where I want it to go. Maybe. Within a month of that happening, our other retained client, Allphones, changed ownership, and the new owners came in, made changes. The CEO left, and they changed the direction of the business, which meant everything we did stopped.
Yep.
And that was it, like within a month of Caltex. And then the third client who was retained was actually AGL. And things were going great guns with them. They were loving what we were doing. And then literally the Sydney office was closed down and amalgamated with Melbourne. And they amalgamated with their Melbourne agency. So within 1 year, all 3 key clients were gone.
Clean slate.
And, one is a blow, but to have all 3 happen was kind of like, what the hell is going on here? At which point I had to rebuild. I had rats and mice. I had a little client that we worked with, and I knew I could rebuild the business. Obviously, people had to go and we scaled the business down. But at that point, I asked myself, do I really... Well, the first thing I asked was, can I do this? And I've built a business up twice before, and I knew I could. I knew what it would take. Second question was, do I want to? And at that point, I just thought, I don't know if I do. And it led to the next question, which was, well, what would you care enough about to want to do? And it was like, ping, this is it. You've been talking the talk. Here is your chance to walk the walk. And it took me a while to realize it wasn't another agency I was building, but a consultancy, which opened up partnership opportunities with agencies, which has happened. And so literally everything changed. I shut down the agency, and I started from the ground up, which was really scary because I'd never done that before. Like, I'd come in as a partner originally with someone else, and then we built the business up. So it was starting from the ground up. As part of the pivot, I decided to do a deep dive into this area I was going to specialize in. I wrote my book, Path to Purpose, and do you know what? When I started it, it was kind of like something I thought I wanted to do. But once I started, it was extraordinary. It was just, I was consumed, and I was working. I'd be up at 5:30 in the morning. I wrote every day for, I think it was 5 weeks. I set myself a goal because I knew myself well enough to know that if I did it over a long period of time, it would never get done. And so I wrote every day outside of work hours, and got it done and written and published within 9 months.
That's actually a really, really important point that you're making there that I want to highlight, is knowing yourself well. So I think it's incredibly important to build a strengths-based business. So at the heart of your business, the business model that you're creating is that it really does utilize those strongest parts of you, so that it becomes easier. Because business is hard. I mean, let's be honest, it's not an easy thing to do, but it is easier if we're in flow with our strengths. But recognizing that you needed that short deadline for the book, and committing to that, as opposed to, well, I'm growing a new business and there's lots to do, and this is going to have to fit in around it. That self-knowledge, that self-leadership is a huge part of you paving this new pathway for yourself.
Yeah, without any doubt at all. And knowing your strengths and skills, one thing that I've found really interesting in this process is that what I'm doing now is employing all the skills I've got in a way that you wouldn't, like when I started, I wouldn't have known. So purpose, for example, brand purpose in the bigger brand sense. Someone might question, with my agency background specifically, whether I was in the best position to deliver on it. Because I didn't come from a big brand agency background. I've always been strong in strategy, but I wasn't a big brand strategist. And yet my background in the agency world was around promotional marketing, shopper marketing, direct marketing. It was all about having to engage your audience. It wasn't about talking to them from a pulpit. It was about having to incite action and engage with them and this area that I'm now in social purpose area, is about action.
Yes, and engagement, very much so, of
100%.
hooking into what people care about.
Absolutely. And I know those strategies. I know how to optimize that, how to drive that. The other thing it's tapped into for me is I really enjoyed, particularly in the last few years, leading my team. So once I learnt the difference between managing and leading and inspiring people and, helping them be their best selves and getting them to solve the problems and getting them to come up with ideas and all of that. Once I discovered that was when I became a real leader, I believe, rather than just the fact that I owned an agency for 20 years. But those skills that I learnt during that period are 100% relevant to the work I'm doing now, because the work I'm doing now, a big part of it is about people and culture and how to engage your people and your teams in building your social purpose and delivering on your social impact goal. So I find I'm using those skills in delivering to my clients as well. So I've just found it, and it continues to happen in the last, even in the last year, just seeing how well aligned all my skills are with what I'm doing today blows me away.
I love that recognition. And I think a lot of us, we'd look at perhaps some of our background experience and sort of write it off as irrelevant. It doesn't matter. But when you actually have the benefit of hindsight and you actually do look back and you recognize nothing we have ever done in those previous chapters has been wasted, because every piece builds on the next piece, and we're like a mosaic. Yes. And what you're finding is that beautiful mosaic, there's some real highlight pieces which are going to be utilized more than ever in the work that you're doing now, but they are still built on that foundation of other experience. So I think it's so important for women to recognize that in our next chapters, in this stage of life, we have so much to draw upon.
Absolutely.
So much we can build from.
And it's not just your work life,
No, not at all.
Someone once said to me, you and everybody else is sitting on a mountain of value, that is unique to you. And everyone has the opportunity to tap into that value and bring it to the world in some kind of form. And I believe more than ever today, where, we seem to be in an age of intuition, I believe that more than ever is true.
I am 100% behind that as well. It is so often, I've my goodness, I don't know how many interviews I've done now on the podcast. There's, over 90, but I've done tele summits and I work with a lot of Next Chapter women, obviously. And that comes up again and again and again, this recognition. It can take some time. It can take some encouragement. It rarely happens in isolation. There's usually a catalyst with you. It was going to that conference overseas and just becoming so fired up that was the turning point. When, even though it didn't actually enact, as you said, it took quite a few years. But if we track back, there is always, in my experience, there is always a point. It can be listening to this podcast and you suddenly go, my goodness, she's done it. I'm going to do my version of that. But yes, then there is that evolution that happens from there. And it's a gradual thing. Sometimes that blinding light can happen overnight. But more often than not, it's an evolution rather than a revolution.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's certainly been in my case.
So how did you find, when you were starting off, as you said, moving into this next iteration, because you'd done it in partnership before and now you were doing it alone, so to speak, where you were spearheading it, even though you've got that beautiful team, the concept of fear, the concept of doubt, which we're always dealing with. I shared the Next Chapter model of change in a previous podcast episode, and that through all of the stages of change, doubt weaves its way through. It never goes away. How did you experience doubt and fear, and how did you deal with it? Or how do you deal with it?
I guess that doubt rears its head as imposter syndrome sometimes. For me, when I got clear on what my what my mission was, like putting social purpose on the business agenda, connected with the belief I have, which is my vision of the kind of world that I believe in and I want to create, that has been the single most powerful thing to force me to lean into any fear or discomfort I might feel. Because it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
I've a couple of years ago, if anyone I'd done a couple of speaking events, really didn't like them. That just wasn't my kind of thing. Now it's a key part of my strategy is speaking. And look, I don't think I'm a natural for putting myself out there as a speaker. And yet today it is because I'm on that mission. Yeah. And I'm looking to see, am I getting my message across? I'm not thinking about me in that. I'm thinking about them, the audience, and am I getting that message across? The same when I do video content. It's kind of like, yuck, I hate doing it, but I need to get this message across in whatever ways is going to happen. So in that way, it forces me to be uncomfortable. In terms of the imposter syndrome, I think in the early days when I did the pivot, I questioned, there were times when I did question myself, but the deeper I dived into the subject, like writing the book for me, one of the great things about writing the book was having to take that deep dive and having to, instead of coming up with, a statement and going, millennials are much more likely to do this or whatever, I had to go and do the research and back it all up. So doing that research, finding the brands that were doing it brilliantly, just going deep into your subject is part of the thing that will remove the fear, because you become an expert.
And I think that concept of doing the research, and then the research is connected to that compelling why. That's what I'm hearing. Is I love how you've got that blend of the mission and the vision, because this is your mission, but it is contributing to your vision of change. And we're both great fans of Seth Godin's book, and This Is Marketing.
Love it.
He very much talks about that the essence of a good marketer is someone who's contributing by helping make a difference, by helping someone change, by helping someone step into becoming the person that they want to be, or making the change that they want to see in the world, and we can contribute to that. So what I'm hearing, and I absolutely resonate with, is that when we get off self, GOS is one of my strategies in life as well. Get off self.
Love it. Yeah, absolutely. And Seth Godin, one of the parts of his book that I love is that just really resonated with me was when he said, if you're not sharing your value, you're stealing, because someone will benefit from value that you have to share. So by, acquiescing to fear and not sharing it, you're actually stealing. And I just thought, put that way, it's really powerful.
It is powerful. And recognizing that, one way that I describe it is that we often spend too much time trying to convince and convert people. And that's not our job. Our job is to contribute and communicate. And so recognizing that I'm not everyone's cup of tea. And you're not everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay, because there's lots of flavors out there. But we need to focus on the contribution that we want to make, the message that we want to share, and our audience. We have to be visible. We need to market, but our audience will find and resonate with us. So businesses, there is a degree of education in your market. It's an emerging market. There's an education demand as well. As in, how does being committed to social purpose, how does that make a difference to not only my sense of fulfillment, but my bottom line as a business owner, because there is so much drive there with the larger businesses. So recognizing that education component as opposed to conversion, what would you say to someone who's going, well, that's all very well for big business who've got the money or the time, but how can I, as a smaller business, even as an individual, how can I adopt social purpose into my own world? How would you encourage us there?
How or why? What's the benefit?
I guess both. Like if we look at the really understanding of it, because I think the concept, I will admit, I don't understand enough about the concept. Like I have a desire to impact the world in a positive way, and I do that in the work that I do in the world, but there could be more. So I guess defining what does it look like in action so that I can understand of how I could bring it into my business.
Absolutely. And what I would say to that is the more strategically aligned your giving or contribution or whatever you want to call it is, the more strategically aligned it is with your business and your brand, the more you're going to be able to leverage it through multiple channels and ways. And the more you leverage it, the more impact you'll create, the more social impact you'll create, and the more commercial benefits you will get out of it. And so the commercial benefits that if you do this well, if you do it strategically, if you find what I call your social purpose sweet spot, which is that, that strategic space where it all comes together and it aligns, what that will do for you, first of all, and I find the people I'm working with that this resonates with the most are the ones that are going, look, I've got a business, it's a successful business, but I feel like there's something missing. I feel like there's got to be something more, and I don't know what it is. So it will answer that question 100%. So that's the first thing. Then the other things it will do is it will attract your people like you, as Seth Godin calls it, your tribe. It'll attract people like you because you're differentiating your brand in a way that emotionally resonates with people. So that goes to that vision of the world you believe in. It's an outward-facing vision rather than, most companies' visions are by 2022 we'll be the best, most respected, whatever, insert category in Australia, the region, the world.
It's very insular.
But most businesses have visions like that, whereas if you integrate social purpose, your vision becomes outward looking and it accommodates your product and or service and the social impact you're going to unleash on the world. So brand differentiation, number one. So emotional engagement with your people. Number two, attracting people like you, employees and customers. Number three, energizing your people from the inside out. So inspiring and unifying them behind a social purpose. And God, I've seen this in action. It's ridiculously powerful. They just bring their best selves to it because they're not just there to do a job and deliver profit. They're there for something bigger than them, and it's aligned with what they do every day. So they bring their best selves, their best ideas, their best energy, and it's extraordinary. I find it really frustrating because I can see all the commercial benefits that so many businesses could get value out of, and yet most people don't understand it.
And I guess that's the perspective that I was having before about part of your journey is the education piece.
Education is key.
It's absolutely key.
And it's great. Go on.
Oh, I'm just curious about, imagine finding that sweet spot that you were finding your social purpose sweet spot. That's like a bit of a tongue twister, that one. So if we're looking for that, am I right in thinking that starts with the individual, with the leader? Like if you were leading your own small business, like if you were a solo or a micro, then obviously it has to start with you. I mean, the larger the organization, the more conversation, I guess, and buy-in. But as a leader, you need to be the one who is starting with the premise to bring people along with you and inspire them to get involved. Does that finding that sweet spot start with the heart, just the things that you feel drawn to supporting, or is there a different type of exercise involved to find that sweet spot?
There is a different exercise, but it's all the above. Mm-hmm. So I run workshops now. I've only been doing it in the last 8 to 9 months. So I run a Find Your Social Purpose Sweet Spot workshop, and I run some other ones as well. But I ask the leader to bring their leadership team in, because what you find is it's actually energizing. So if you've got that group in the room, it's not just one person's perspective. The leader gets to bring, the heart, what matters to him or her, but the team, they just bring it in a different way, and they bring insights and opportunities that the leader alone might not have. The other thing that does is it takes them on a journey, and they have ownership of it, and they're excited by it because they've created it. That's one involvement. Yeah, and that's one thing that is part of the pivot I've done. Is I'm used to working with big brands where they give me a brief, and I take it back to the agency, and we deliver the solutions and come and present it back to them. Now it's changed, because now I believe every business, never said it this way before, but it's been in my head for a while. I believe every business has a truth, a brand truth, something, a value that can impact society that is not yet unleashed. And so my job is to help the businesses find it themselves. So the workshops I do are about facilitating that process. So the gold is there. I'm not going away and coming back with a solution. My role is to find that gold that is already, you've got it. You just haven't necessarily recognized it. And it's very aligned with, what your service or product is already delivering. It's just taking it down to another level. Another layer.
It's like social purpose excavation. It's really
yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, it's chiseling. It's finding that statue underneath the rock.
Oh, who was it? Michelangelo saying that all he did was remove the rock because David was already in there.
Do you know, that's a beautiful. That is. Can I steal that?
Of course you can.
That's a beautiful analogy for this, and it's completely aligned with. I feel like that. Was it Milton Friedman who said the purpose of business is to deliver shareholder return? And, that has to be the only focus of a business. No, I know. But it's crazy, isn't it? Because if you then added to that, and that will be the priority regardless, and that will allow you to screw people, screw the planet and everything else.
But that's okay, because there's we're on purpose, right? That is what we're here for. It's that one makes me feel ill as well. And that absolute need with the way that the world and our perspectives has changed, it cannot be that way anymore. No. There are too many other stakeholders that need to be taken into account. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. As one of the things that's coming across most clearly as we're drawing this conversation to a close is the passion that you feel for the subject then helps you become so articulate in that area. Like the ideas flow. And I think that's what I call a soapbox moment. Like if I gave you a soapbox, and this is anyone who's listening, if you had a soapbox and you could stand on it and you could talk about the things that are really important to you, that what you stand for, what you believe in, what you want for the world, what you want for your clients, then your natural purpose is going to come flowing through. Yes. Now, you may talk about lots of different things, but you'll find if you actually do a little bit of that excavation that there is a common thread that runs underneath them. And your desire to contribute to make the world a better place, and understanding that through the lens of business that you can, or organizations and individuals can have significant social impact. It feels like it's been coursing through your veins for quite some time, and it was a natural progression.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And I think for other people, it's finding, like you said, finding what you're passionate about, finding what you would get on a soapbox for, because in there, somewhere in there, there's that value that you can bring to the world.
Absolutely. And there needs to be, I mean, we are running businesses as opposed to charities and part of this conversation. So there needs to be the commercial aspect, but there's no apology for commercial aspect when you have purpose coupled with it. Then it feels like that beautiful combination.
100%. And that was where my two worlds collided.
Yes.
In a beautiful way. It was, helping brands have success, drive profit, and creating social impact, and no apology whatsoever, because the more successful a business can be through a social purpose strategy, the more impact they'll create and the more value they'll bring to the world, and it's win, win, win. Everyone's happy.
I do like a triple win.
Me too.
So shall we, the book that you wrote, Path to Purpose, How to Use Cause Marketing to Build a More Meaningful and Profitable Brand. So I'll make sure that the link goes into the show notes for anyone who'd like to get their hands on a copy of that, because it's definitely one that can start your head thinking down this path. But just as a close here, and also we'll go to your website, which I believe is The Cause Effect.
thecauseeffect.com.au.
Perfect. I'll make sure that link is there as well, but people can certainly go and start checking you out straight away. But just imagine a woman who is listening to this call now, or listening to this podcast now, or watching the video and going, I can feel that pivot coming. What would you say to her to encourage her to explore this different way of doing business, or to step into this new thing, leaving corporate, moving into their own purposeful business, etc.? What words of encouragement would you have to share, Carolyn?
I think, as I said before, I think today more than ever, someone described it to me as the age of intuition. We are in the age of intuition. Now, for women especially, there's a lot of power in that. But I think what that means is the old structures of business, they're just becoming less relevant. So if you're passionate about something, if you're teetering on the edge, now, I'm going to sound like Malcolm Turnbull now, but there has never been a better time than now. But there has never been a better time than now to explore it and to really define what value you think you can bring and to whom. And going back to Seth Godin, it's what is your smallest viable market? You don't need to appeal to everybody. But what is your smallest viable market? Who are they? What do they look like? How do they think? And start shaping your thinking around them and their needs. And you'll soon know whether you've got something of value. It doesn't take a lot of people. It's just finding your people like you.
That's wonderful. Very, very wise advice. So again, thank you so much for spending your time.
It's been a pleasure.
Taking us down that pathway. It's been a delight to hear how the evolution rather than the revolution took place.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure chatting to you, Angela.
Wonderful. Thanks, darling. And to you, my lovely listener or viewer, this idea of finding that smallest viable market for sure, but pulling into that idea that you have value to share, you have value to give. And as you've heard from Carolyn's story today, there's often that catalyst moment, and you may have had it already. You may have already had that seed planted of that desire to change, to pivot, to move in a new direction, to start your next chapter. So as you've heard us discussing here, the old structures of business are becoming irrelevant. The market is opening up. There is opportunity for you to really deliver the value that you have inside of you. So both of us encourage you most strongly to start to get off self and look at how you can bring that value to the world. I would love to see you flourish in your next chapter. Take that first step today. So until we talk again on the next podcast episode, this is Angela Raspas saying, take very good care, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Thanks for listening to the Your Next Chapter podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love you to share it, perhaps leave a review in iTunes, and of course, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're looking for your own business breakthrough at the moment, then I've got something special for you. Visit angelaraspas.com/breakthrough guide. That e-guide takes you through the 4 key gaps to close that may be stopping you from reaching the next level in your business. I hope it's extremely helpful, and I look forward to talking with you again on the next episode.